All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Advocacy Prime. Actually, our very first conjunction episode here with Illinois Council for Exceptional Children. We are here at AP-ICEC in Naperville, Illinois on this beautiful Friday, November 1st. And I am having the absolute blessing of being here in front of State Representative Terra Costa Howard of the 48th District. Just got out of her keynote speech, and I feel like, ladies and gentlemen, she speaks right to us. She is an advocate. I mean, the definition of a prime advocate, from mental health to DCFS, with children, to adults. And I'm just so happy to have you here. You served 8 years on the Glen Ellyn 41 School Board. You were in the Village Plan Commission, a religious ed instructor, Girl Scout leader, volunteer in schools, and of course you're a state representative and an attorney, and also you served, working adjunct as a professor over at which college again?
College of DuPage.
Yeah, over at College of DuPage. So Terra, welcome. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I really kind of want to start off because I love your values and everything, but I want to get more of an insight about what does the average day of State Representative Terra Costa Howard look like?
Well, so we have 2 days when I'm in Springfield and here at home in the district. So when I'm home in the district, my day could start, I'll say about 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure that I get myself up and out the door. But also I have a family. My daughter is a senior in high school, so making sure she has what she needs to set off on her day. But then also I start, again, very early. I start with meetings in my local office. For example, I'll have breakfast with all the superintendents in my district,
wow.
And we catch up on legislation. I may be off to another meeting, an event. One of the things that I've really enjoyed doing is touring different facilities and different businesses in the community. I might have a little time to answer some emails and such, do some research, but by the end of the day, sometimes my day can end at maybe 5 and I can have dinner with my family. And some days I'm off to an event in the evening to either speak or just honestly to listen. When I'm in Springfield, we hit the ground running. I mean, we have committee meetings in the morning. We are on the House floor voting on legislation, and we can also have committee meetings in the afternoons and into the evening. So it's crazy. There are days, and I'm not quite sure how we got it all done. Coffee is key.
Oh, coffee's everybody's best friend. If you don't have the jitters still by 1 o'clock there, I don't know if you're doing coffee right.
Yeah. Well, I have a coffee maker in my office in Springfield to make sure that I get through the entire day.
That is so cool, though. I mean, did you ever think you would see yourself having? Again, I had to talk to an assistant to your assistant. I mean, I think that is so awesome. It's a humble brag for yourself, But did you ever think that you would have an office in Springfield? You're a legislator.
No. Obviously, I don't know too many people who really sort of picture themselves in this place. I've always been involved in public service. I served as an assistant public defender for many years, and that's really where my passion. Well, I should say, actually, I was a staff attorney before that, and I was appointed to represent the DuPage County court system on a juvenile committee. And so that's really where some of the seeds were planted. And then as an assistant public defender, it just sort of grew. I then was on a school board. So again, my life and my trajectory and my passion is sort of always been the same path. But I really love being a legislator.
I mean, how did you even get into, there's something that had to impact you to want to say hey, I need to advocate for children specifically, right? What is there something that you would like to share about an instance in your life where it just kind of I kind of tell the viewers it's something that hits you right in the face,
Again, when Judge Bob Anderson had asked me to serve as the representative of the judicial system on a committee, and I listened to the stories about families involved in DCFS, families who have children who have delinquency issues, and really it was about the chaos of what was going on in their lives. I'm really lucky. I came from a wonderful family, strong, supportive, and I realized that most people don't really have what I had. So I step up, and I had cases that really changed my life and my perspective. And it's also allowed me then to talk about those things with my own daughters, and they recognize what it means to be an advocate for someone.
I think that's really important. It's like, teaching the younger generation, right? Like of the things that are important, where I think many of us can kind of get wrapped up around, just the negativity of that happens. And, of course, I think what we're passionate about can have some negative connotations to it, but it's like, we're talking about it so we can make it positive, so we can make change. And I think that's where, like, you and I can really relate to each other in that. It's like we just want to help people, and I've luckily come from a nice upbringing as well. And like so I think that we like to take advantage of that and hopefully give people the quality of life that we've had, or at least try.
Absolutely. And I think, too, as I sort of talked about earlier today, one of the things that I see as a legislator, how we make that happen is on certain issues, and I would say when it comes to kids, people are really in agreement on what needs to be done. It's the how do we get there. And so sometimes we file legislation in the hopes of bringing people to the table to be able to have those kinds of discussions and come up with a solution or an improvement to an issue that we can all work together on.
Yeah.
And I really think that that's it's the proper way to do it.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the themes that it's talked about on this podcast. It's like, finding a common group, a community, and that we can't just survive on one voice, but that community has to be a voice, right? Like a community, a village of people that comes together and says that, hey, we see issues here, and that we want to improve the overall quality of life of everybody. So let's come together.
Absolutely. And one of the ways that I've seen us be able to do that in Springfield is we have different caucuses that are very issue specific, or things that people are very passionate about. Obviously,
can you define caucuses real fast?
Caucus is basically a group of people that are in a predominantly agreement on particular issues. So you hear about the traditional Democrat and Republican caucus, and those are their members that talk about the issues that are important to them and the positions that they're going to take. But in Springfield, again, for me, this is a great way to talk about bipartisanship, is the different kinds of subject matter caucuses. So, for example, I am part of the Special Needs Caucus. So we have an opportunity to deal and discuss special education legislation, people with developmental disabilities, advocacy for them. And it doesn't matter what political party you're a part of. It's how do you want to effectuate change? So it's a great way for people to come together and work on these issues that we all support and believe in.
Yeah. And like listening to you speak this morning, and obviously doing my homework and all that, I just think that you're humanistic and you're realistic, and those are qualities that sometimes I don't think that people get to see in legislators, right? Like I love to watch the world news every single day, and I'm not seeing legislators reflected positively there, in a positive manner, but like, I don't know, I think people are so focused on what's negatively happening, and that gets reflected poorly upon people who are doing the good things. And like, that's also why I'm happy to have you here, is so we can let people know you are actually awesome.
No, you're right, though, and I think that that's part of it. I mean, it's easy to read what comes in on a postcard through the mail. It's easy to see some, 20-second soundbite on a commercial or a clip off a Facebook page. But until you really sit down and talk to individuals about what the work is that they're doing, it's really hard to understand. And so I believe that that's part of my responsibility as a legislator, is to be out in the community, to actually have those sometimes very hard conversations. Yesterday I had the opportunity to attend Soaring Eagle Academy, a SEAL, in the 48th District. It's a therapeutic day school, amazing work that they're doing with a lot of kids who their holistic approach is the last place for many of these children. And it was the second time that I had been there, but I was just there handing out Halloween candy. And I watched families and staff members literally chasing a little boy down the hallway to keep him safe, but he was in his Halloween costume and he was smiling. And I'm not going to lie, I actually started to cry. It had been we'd been a lot of rough things going on this week, and it was a moment for me when it reaffirmed, this is why I do this. Yeah. This is why I drive 3 hours.
I love it.
This is why I stay up late at night, or I don't sleep so much sometimes.
That's awesome.
Unfortunately, miss time with my own family. Yeah. But they understand it, and again, handing out candy yesterday, it makes it all worth it.
Again, it's like, it's people like you who are in the trenches like that, and you get to really see firsthand. And I'm going to kind of go into some of the, the bills that you advocated for, and that, and how I'm transitioning this is that, like, you see the trenches, and you of course you just saw it this week, and you've seen so many of it, and and there's those other maybe legislators that are making a very general statement that might not be in the trenches, and they're in their office and not able to see what you are, what you're doing, and what you're passionate about, and why you're voting for certain things on the floor. Some things that really stuck out. I mean, again, I can list all of the items that you voted on, but House Bill 2265, requiring civic education in public schools. I mean, that's one end of the spectrum here. And then you go to, Senate Bill 25, where you're establishing protections. Like, now you're advocating for a whole new spectrum. And then you go to, Senate Bill 1610, deportation regulations, and more importantly, House Bill 836, authorizing temporary guardians for children whose parents who have been detained or deported. Like, there's no protection before that? Like, what it just, sometimes it boggles my mind, and we get blessed, like, having people like you to go in and so are you able to come and, like, or speak on any of those, or generally? I kind of just threw some different bills out at you.
Sure. So actually the bill regarding the guardianship piece for children, the immigrant children, that was Representative Jennifer Gon-Gershowitz. She is probably from Glenview, and she is probably one of my closest friends down in Springfield, being freshman friends together. And Gon-Gershowitz is actually an immigration attorney. And so ironically enough, I have actually done special immigrant justice visas and through Heartland Alliance and their programs, because we do have these kids who are undocumented, who are here, that were brought, they were kids when they were brought here. And so with what's happening in the Justice Department at a federal level, Illinois has an opportunity to fix some of these things. So again, it doesn't impact a parent's deportation proceeding. It has nothing to do with the parents. But here we have Representative Gon-Gershowitz, who is an immigration attorney and had a nonprofit center on immigration rights in the northern suburbs, advocating for kids. And so it was kind of unique, because I'd actually done these special immigrant justice these visas, that I was able to sit down with her and kind of walk through what it looks like when you're in front of a probate judge. And again, all that bill did was allow parents to designate where those kids could, stay and who had guardianship rights to them while they went through their deportation proceedings. Because otherwise those kids would have been potentially in DCFS care and custody. They don't have to be. We have an easy mechanism to fix that, and we did.
And why flood something too?
Absolutely.
Why flood something that's already, respectfully flooded?
Yeah.
So you wear multiple hats. You're a mother, you're a lawyer, you're state representative, and so when we talk about, how passionate you are for the DCFS, and I kind of call people like us who have high emotional IQs, like that we kind of do lead with our emotion, but I think that you also have a very high, intelligence IQ as well, much higher than mine, and so that's a gift. That's awesome. But how do you balance that? Like, so you have this legislation, and I think you cognitively know that I can't be leading way too much I can't be leading way too much with emotion here. I have to lead with my lawyer hat, like, get the mom one off, or kind of halfway on. And
so I often talk about my life as either a triangle or a square, just depending on where that is. So I'm still a practicing attorney, and I have my own law practice. And so I'm a legislator, and I'm a mom. I have family, so there's my triangle. And a lot of it is, which way do I spin, and which needle is at the top, which point, excuse me. And it is very hard not to lead with emotion. I'm lucky because I have colleagues who can remove the emotion and think from a very practical aspect. And so sometimes it's that ability to take a step back and go, okay, deep breath. As I said, I could definitely use some different breathing techniques at times. But I also think leading with emotion, how do you can't shut that off all the time. And I think that's often what makes some of us better advocates, because when we talk about something, you can hear it in our voice. We're, I don't want to say a fighter, but it is, we are passionate about what we believe in. I also serve on one of the committees that I serve on in the House is the Judiciary Civil. So some of the laws that you had, the bills that you talked about had actually been through a committee which I also serve on. And so that's when I get to be the lawyer in Springfield, because we're also viewing this legislation as lawyers. But we often are also asking people questions and evaluating their testimony with that emotional piece, because we deal with, these decisions we make impact somebody's life, and we have to take that seriously.
Absolutely. And I think emotion is very beneficial to us, because it can really help us lead us to, the right decision. We know the right decision. And before this, I was kind of talking to you about like these no-brainers, where I think you and I would pretty much agree on 99% of the things that pass through your desk, but then you're like, this is a no-brainer. But is there times where you like walk into a hearing or where we're proposing a bill, and you're like, oh yeah, no doubt, this is totally gonna get passed. Like, this should be happening. And is there times where it's like, wait, what? Why are people voting nay?
Yes, and so part of that is also being able to do your homework. So sometimes when you're sitting on that committee and you walk in with one way of thinking, and yet you've sat and listened to all this testimony and your mind has changed, I think that's part of it too, is that ability to recognize you don't know everything, and to be able to absorb that information. One of the bills that I talked about regarding the personal needs allowance, again, that's a no-brainer. $60 a month, who can live on that?
And she's alluding to like, people with disabilities through, Social Security are able to get their $60 a month, and they're expected, again, $60 a month, to use that to buy, if you're a female, feminine hygiene products, and just other basic living needs. Tell me if you can live off $60 a month there, Representative Terra Costa Howard.
Absolutely not. I don't think anybody really can, and that's
your daughter?
No.
Can your daughters?
No, absolutely not. House Bill 2815. That was the point of the bill, and it was to increase that personal needs allowance. And again, I think as I alluded to, sometimes I'm surprised when I think that's an exact piece of legislation that was a no-brainer to me, and yet there was opposition to it by people who I would suggest are huge advocates for individuals with disabilities. So it's that opportunity then to sit down and have a better understanding as to why they're opposed and how to fix that. So how do we, we say carve something out so that that particular group may not be impacted. Even as I've been here today, how many parents have actually come up to talk to me about some of the issues that their children are having with living communities that they're working on.
And like, I guess the issue that you're talking about is, that we just don't have, the state of Illinois doesn't have the money for it. And then you're like, okay, well then how can we find it? But then there's also other bills that are trying to do the same thing, right? Like, and it's disheartening. I talked to a disability advocate who, goes down and went down to Springfield just to advocate for the blood draw bill, and walks in there all passionate, all giddy, and all of a sudden he walks right out and someone's walking right through for a marijuana bill, or like, or just some other type of bill that's going to be a whole nother issue that will need funding as well,
and you're asked to do that constantly. Like you said, you might be dealing with social issue legislation 1 minute and have to sit through, an hour-long debate about it, and then you're going to turn right around and talk about ethylene oxide and environmental issues to a budget concern and a funding issue. I mean, you really have to keep flipping the switch and direction in which you go all the time.
Yeah.
And so individuals who can't think on their feet and have that ability to pivot in terms of a topic to think about have a hard time. And as a freshman, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's been difficult at times. It's emotionally draining.
Because what chemical did you say? Like something oxide?
Sure.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
let me get back to you. No, we want it now.
Yeah. Well, ethylene oxide is something that we're talking about often. You see it in the media right now. That was the Sterigenics plan. It's a chemical that has been released in the environment for sterilization.
Oh, that was the building that was emitting all that in the community.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Now I know
Nope,
what
that's
you're saying.
okay. So we, here we thought we had sort of ended dealing with that issue, thankfully, and then we had to go back to Springfield for veto session this week, and talk about it again because it's happening up in the northern suburbs, Waukegan area, and there's several plants there. There's also a plant out in Joliet, which is actually going to hopefully be okay, but maybe not. And so every time you walk through the doors of the chamber, you are thinking about how you're going to impact somebody's lives each day.
And you think about it, it's like, I mean, it's very simple for you just to go home and have my family, all this stuff, and try to turn it off. But like, then, I think you start thinking about them. You're like, there's a family whose only option is to move, or, if this bill doesn't progress, and then that's, you think about it. If I had to pick up and move right now, like, how tough would that be? Because of someone's company, but they also have their opinion and their values and their facts. And it just, you have a very, people say we have a hard job. I think that you do as well, because you have to wear so many hats and know so much about things and actually be a good listener, which I think that, it seems like you've done really well at that just by listening to people. And I think that's also like kind of what fuels your passion too.
It is, and I think that was one of the reasons I decided to actually run for office, because I think that people people just want to be heard, and even when you don't agree with them and their perspective, they want to know that somebody is listening and is able to maybe follow up or look into something a little bit more. And I don't believe that we had that for several years, and so my door is always open. I mean, I even when we don't agree, the door is open. Even when they're not going to change my mind and I'm not going to change theirs, but it's my responsibility to do that. I have a mom who comes in, I've met with numerous times, who has children with severe disabilities, and the blood draw and testing that her children need, and how we can fix the insurance code, how we can make sure certain things are covered, how we can do things and make a difference. Now, I can't promise anything, right? I don't know if I can make that happen, but I know that mom, and I know that anybody who comes through the doors of my office at least appreciates that I did take into consideration what they have to say, and we have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just taking consideration into what anybody has to say and their viewpoints, and know that there's always going to be a left and a right side to an argument. And one thing that I kind of want to learn more about and get your perspective on, and we kind of alluded to before this, we talk about, your passion about advocating for, a divorce court, right? When we are in the court, and that there's two sides of the story always, right? And like, but whose lives does that impact, right? It's going to impact the family, the family and the children. And are there any examples or maybe a story that you can share about something that you had to advocate for because maybe someone just didn't listen to the other side of the story, and therefore it impacted someone's life?
So as part of my role as an advocate for kids, particularly as a court-appointed guardian ad litem, I serve in many different courtrooms. So yes, I'm in family court and divorce and parentage, DCFS work. I also serve in probate court, which handles guardianship proceedings.
Okay.
So I've sort of been in all those kinds of courtrooms. And yeah, it's particularly in family situations, and it doesn't necessarily just mean, mom and dad. It could be in guardianship proceedings where maybe a grandparent or a sister or brother has become the guardian of these kids and mom and dad want the kids back. They're so wrapped up in their feelings that they often forget about what's best for that child. So they miss it, and while in those moments they think they're doing what's best for a child, my role is independent of that. And so when I'm making a recommendation to a court, it is a little bit different. I've had all kinds of cases, but one that really always sort of stands out for me is I represented a little 8-year-old boy who was homeless. He was designated as homeless, him and his sister. And mom was sort of bouncing from, we call it couch surfing, from apartment to apartment with different people.
Separate from the kids?
They were considered homeless because they did not have their own permanent residence, but initially she was with the kids, and then was arrested. And so brother and sister were living with a 19-year-old sister who had 3 children of her own. So it was the 2 of them, sister, her 3 kids, and boyfriend. And little boy made an outcry at school. And again, this is the first time this little boy's even really been in the school. It was like the first or second week he was there. He clearly had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, was on medication, but it wasn't working. And we had people who wanted this little boy to stay with the sister in this chaotic situation. And then there were others who wanted the child to go with a grandma. Mom, who was now in jail, was saying, I think he should stay with the 19-year-old sister. And I'm standing there looking at the judge going, absolutely not. 19-year-old sister has enough on her plate. She's doing the best that she can. But yes, with 3 kids. And she needed help. And so we were able to get that little boy with a grandma locally. And so it was hard because everybody's fighting for what they think is best for them and not really thinking about what was best for that little boy. And so those are the kinds of things that happen time and time again. Oftentimes, I'm advocating for a child, and then I have parents who are represented by attorneys who are fighting like dogs too to make sure that whatever their clients want, they get too. And people stop and forget about what's best for that child. I'm really lucky in DuPage County because I believe our judicial system, the judges that serve in those courtrooms, do put the lives of those children first. Yeah. And I'm lucky because I don't know if that happens everywhere. And while I do think judges do the best that they can with the information they have before them, they're not, they make mistakes.
And that's not your most, your most traumatic story. I bet. And there's probably, what you alluded to, the grandmas, the 19-year-old, and then there's much younger than that probably. And so, as a strong advocate and experiencing that, and I mean, how do you go home and, because sometimes, there's those days where you're just like, all you're thinking about is that child. And like, how do you, respectfully turn it off? But you can't,
No, you can't. And so kids who I work with have my cell phone number. They know they can call me any day or night. And sometimes when you're on a case with high stress, needs, chaos, you're always waiting for that phone to ring. And so it is hard sometimes to go home to, what is perceived to be a regular, normal living environment, but there's not normal. No family is normal, shall we say?
No, absolutely
not. There's no such thing. But it is hard because I'm lucky. I've got 3 amazing daughters who they need me too, and so learning how to modulate myself as well, how to turn that off. I love yoga when I can get there. I tease about learning how to breathe. I listen to a lot of podcasts to try to, divert my attention. And sometimes I just mindlessly watch TV late at night because give me a Harry Potter movie and I will have a smile on my face.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's isn't that the greatest? It's when you have that really long day and you're like, let me get hooked on The Bachelor for and it just literally say how stupid this is. But I'm still watching it, and I'm humming back and back because it's like therapeutic, It's like weird.
We call it mindless TV because it allows you to escape what's really happening in your life. I have a dog who, she may be not always well behaved, but every time you walk through the door, the dog comes running, bounding as if it's the first time they've ever met you. And I joke, my dog gives hugs. And so, and I've, teenagers. And so it's just a little bit different. And sometimes those are just the little reminders that you have to bring you back to center, to realize that, you're lucky. And, that charity of immersing yourself in someone else's chaos can be really hard and take its toll on you on a personal level.
Well, I'm just absolutely inspired by you. And you just say how lucky you are. But, again, I sincerely mean this, how lucky we are to have you here and to have you as someone who's just so positive and just an amazing influence, especially for young women. All the things that you have your hands in, and it's just inspirational. And I really hope that people get a better insight into your life here through this podcast. Now, I'm just going to kind of wrap things up a little bit because you are a very busy lady, and we talked about some tips of, how people as advocates are able to kind of, focus on ourselves, right? I think that's something that's very important. And when we find ourselves like, actually, I don't know where I'm actually going with this question, but that is okay, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to just... Oh, you know what? Okay. I just want to wrap... This is what I was going.
I was going to make a comment about mental health for teachers, but go ahead.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's talk about that. And actually, let's wrap up with that. I want to talk about the just real fast, the 22nd birthday for transition. Because, again, just researching you, doing my homework, and listening to you there, you're literally hitting all, these things that are Advocacy Prime is all about, in that we need to get the word out for things that are just kind of weird, and it's like, wait, why is this happening? Why was this was written so long ago, and why is this still happening? So when we look at the age of 22, ladies and gentlemen, Public Law 94-142 says that it's the Mother Law of Special Education, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and you could be in school until you're 22 years old, a day before your 22nd birthday. So if you have a birthday that is 5 days before school ends, you're going to be out on that 6th day before school ends. Then you're off into the abyss of the metaphorical wall, which my listeners know about, of life after transition. So what was your thought process when you first learned about that?
So I was actually touring Soaring Eagle Academy, and I know that I had heard that before, but I guess I didn't have I'm a visual learner, so I didn't really have a mental picture of what that really looked like.
Yeah.
And then I met a student, Jamie, at the school, and the principal of the school was explaining to me how Jamie would be that it was actually his last day of school. Now, I was in the school in the beginning of October, and I'm thinking, it's October, the school year's not up. And she really kind of walked me through and explained how today was his last day, and tomorrow he wouldn't be here. And that impacted not just Jamie, because he's not only turning 22, but all the other students in that classroom. I mean, it's that cliff that you have no preparation for. And so Representative Hurley had filed the bill to change that would allow a student to actually finish the entire school year. Now, again, that's a piece of legislation to me that should have been a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we want people to make that completion. But I can't tell you the number of emails that I've received already in 1 week from school administrators talking about the implication to their district on that bill.
And is it mostly funding?
It's a funding. Well, it's a funding issue and a staff issue, which is also obviously about funding. But it would also raise the issue about our students who happen to be placed out of state because of their disabilities. And if that state doesn't recognize our law, how that child is automatically coming back, and then are we transitioning them to a different program and whatnot. But I think what really struck me about that was the fact that we all know that we could do better about that, right? We need to improve our we have some great transition programs in DuPage County, and across the state, I should say.
Glen Ellyn does, absolutely.
We do. We're lucky. Yeah. However, it's not that way everywhere, and we can still do better. Yeah. So, as I was, doing the research on this bill, I'm thinking to myself, we've got to fix this. Now, do I think that we're going to be able to pass that bill as is? Well, I would love to say yes, but I also have the ability to recognize it's an example of us sitting around the table and figuring out what we need to do, because what we need to do, what's best for that child, that student, is probably allow them to either finish out a semester or the school year so they can make those transitions. Yeah. But we also have to recognize and acknowledge the financial and staffing implications that it could possibly have on that school district, and thus the property taxes of those homeowners. And so we have to be aware of all of those pieces when we talk about it. We all want to do what's right. It's not always easy and as clean and simple as many think, and as it may appear to some. And so we need to keep working on it. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's one of the things I'm very passionate about, ladies and gentlemen, is that I want transition services to be delivered more effectively, and that's something I'm going to be studying a lot more and trying to voice throughout this podcast. So, we alluded to kind of talking about mental health, and we're going to wrap up on here. It kind of says you said something about mental health for teachers, and we look at caseloads that are way too big. We look at lack of paraprofessionals that are in rooms. We look at just teachers who are going through very tough times at therapeutic day schools or just in their classrooms, and there's so many people that go like oh, you're such a special person, like I couldn't ever do that, and I don't know, and it's like I walk past an AP stats room, like an advanced placement stats room, like, yeah, forget that. Like, I can't, I'm not doing that either. It's so, but we all need, and not just people in self-contained classrooms or resource classrooms or in AP stats rooms. We all need our mental health, and it's important because our mental health and our ACE scores are reflected onto our students. And so, do you have any sort of insight or input onto any of that?
Yes. So one of the things I also serve on the Mental Health and Addiction Committee in the House. I serve on the K-12 curriculum as well. And we have been talking about, and we were able to, about, I don't want to say an unfunded mandate because heaven knows we have plenty of those, but as part of our in-service training in our schools is making sure our staff have the self-care that they need. I know how hard it is for me to come home after a long day. I can't imagine what you all deal with. And again, regardless of what type of classroom you're working in, whatever service that you're providing, if you're not on your A game, and sometimes you're on your B game, everybody has those days, but if you're not the best in front of your students and on, that impacts them as well. And if you're not healthy, that's not the best place for them either. We need to take care of those who are taking care of and teaching our kids each and every day. And we have that obligation to all of you to make sure that we do that. So yes, we are working on legislation and passed legislation to begin to address those things. Your in-service days are so jam-packed with the newest, the latest, the greatest, and whatever new, is happening in your district. But heck, wouldn't it be great to have you all have an opportunity to take a meditation yoga class? Maybe have an opportunity during your planning period to really check in with one another about how we can help, right? Are you doing okay? Why don't we go to lunch? Why don't we let's just put our gym shoes on and go out for a walk. Clear your head a little bit. We got to check if we have to take care of one another, and if this is just a small piece of it, then it's a start.
Yeah. Just in closing, my school is a trauma-informed school, and I think that's very important because the administrators do such a fantastic job of we're being trauma-informed about students, but we're also being trauma-informed about teachers, and that everybody has a past. Everybody has something that has happened to them. And so it's important to be cognizant of that. It's important to be aware of it, and it's important to I want to openly talk about mental health so much more because it's just like we need to. People need to talk about it. And when you don't talk about it, when you keep it bottled up, it's going to really react, and it's going to lead to less of student progress.
Absolutely. And that is something that we talk about at my superintendent meetings. I would love for our schools to have some, I'm going to call them, downtime rooms, right? Where these mental health.
Exactly.
Because these kids, again, regardless of where they are, they need that moment. We had a student at my daughter's high school last year leave the building during the school day and committed suicide. And that was devastating, as you can imagine, to the student population. I don't know, would a room like that or a place for that student to go have helped? I don't know, I can't answer that. But I know that it does help some students.
Yeah. And
it might even help some teachers to be able to have a safe space where they can just let it go. And we have to remove the stigma. There is every person on this planet struggles with something.
Yes.
And when we can remove that shame, when we can bring that out into the light and talk about it in an open way, we all can get better from that and learn from that and help one another. We're human, and that's what we need to do for each other.
And it's like some of the police department too is struggling with, especially we're seeing a lot of that happen in Chicago, and it's like really daunting. As if not, there's more pressure even on them because they're trying to question what's right and what's wrong and what's my instinct and is my instinct correct, and again, that humanistic aspect is just not appreciated especially by the media, and by social media and by people, and like people need to appreciate that. I talk about in how I traveled to Peru this summer, and I went into a catacomb, and there was all these bones in there, and they were all the same. In terms of like that, we are all the same. We are all human. Like we are a person that has different experiences, which lead us to have these different types of perspectives and emotions and like things that we struggle with. And so like that needs to be recognized, and that there's no right way, and but there's a way that we can get to a certain altitude together to help cope and to help our strength. So I love that, and that's a fantastic idea. And State Representative Terra Costa Howard, that's so cool. Man, I'm floored I have you here, and like thank you for being what I call a prime advocate, and please keep doing this. And I hope that I'm able to, you're able to help inspire young women and young men and adults just to think differently and to care for themselves, but also find some place inside of us that we can care for others as much as we can.
Well, thank you for having me today, and I want to say thank you and to all of your colleagues. You change the lives of children each and every day, and you don't hear thank you very often. But so on behalf of myself, the state of Illinois, and our families, thank you for what you do. You really make a difference in a child's life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in here to our very first AP-ICEC and AdvocacyPRIME episode. It was amazing. Thank you again.
My
and
pleasure.
I hope all of you have a fantastic day.